World Bank's Vice President for the South Asian region, Martin Bryza, is hopeful that the creditors, including China, will fulfill their commitments in supporting Sri Lanka to restructure its debt. Speaking to Indivari Amuwatta during our current affairs program at Hyde Park on Derana 24 during his visit to Sri Lanka, World Bank's Regional Vice President is of the view that successful implementation of reforms benefit both Sri Lanka and the creditors as it creates opportunities for both the parties. Further, Martin Bryza also highlighted the importance of Sri Lanka achieving the debt targets outlined by the IMF to develop its credit worthiness.
What you want Sri Lanka to prioritize at this current juncture, especially when we talk about launching a reforms agenda, but then engaging with creditors to secure a proper debt restructuring framework here?
Clearly, the debt restructuring is critical for the viability of Sri Lanka's economy. The government cannot afford to pay back all of the debt, so it does require relief from its external creditors. The Parliament has approved a domestic debt restructuring that will provide some additional relief. With that space, the government will have the resources to pay teachers, to pay doctors, to provide proper social support. So it's absolutely critical for the viability of the program. Ultimately, this transformation, this crisis as an opportunity, is something for the Sri Lankan people to realize. And hopefully they will, and hopefully the government will continue to lead in that direction.
Currently, when we engage with our creditors, China is not on the same platform, but there is a country-to-country partnership. How do you view this situation, especially when it comes to Sri Lanka striking an agreement with our external creditors to secure a sustainable debt treatment strategy?
Well, the IMF went to their board with financial assurances from all of the major official creditors. That's a condition for them to go to the board. Those financial assurances mean that China, together with the other creditors, the ones of the Paris Club, the ones associated with but not in the Paris Club, will offer a debt relief on comparable terms. And this is now what is being discussed with the official creditors. What is the cutoff date? How exactly do you define the comparable treatment? 2 rounds of meetings have been held so far. We hope that a third meeting will be held relatively soon. And yes, time is important. And I do hope that China, together with the other official creditors, will move and will be true to the commitments that they made to the IMF board and to the Sri Lankan authorities. I just hope that we reach a positive conclusion soon, because Sri Lanka really need that space. Otherwise, a lot of the other things that we've just been talking about are going to be very difficult to deliver. So I think there is in my mind, a clear relationship between settling the issue with the creditors and having the policy space to move ahead with the difficult structural reforms. And ultimately, this should be in the interest of the creditors too, because if the reform program is successful, if the reforms are sustained and continue, ultimately the country is going to do better. That's going to open up more opportunities for them, and is going to make sure that whatever restructured debt is left is for certain going to be repaid.
After Sri Lanka announcing a default, the credit worthiness of the country, now with the reforms program, how do you observe and what have you got to tell us about Sri Lanka's credit worthiness when we talk about investments and those who are looking at Sri Lanka?
Of course, we've made good progress, but we're not yet over the hump. I think we do need that agreement from the creditors. We do need the certainty that Sri Lanka's debt servicing costs are going to fall to the levels defined by the IMF program. And by the way, these are levels that were defined in relation to countries that are so-called market access countries. So those are countries that in principle have access to the capital markets. I think Sri Lanka is in a situation that doesn't leave a lot of room to be more generous. And if anything, the debt burden, even after the restructuring, will still be quite high. So continued discipline will be important. But with successful implementation of the program, yes, I do think Sri Lanka will become more attractive for investors and will regain its credit worthiness. But it will require persistent implementation. What you can't do is abandon ship because you think it worked after 6 months and then say, okay, we're out of the worst, let's go back to what we were doing before. That's not going to work, and I think that's a very important message, that it requires persistent efforts.